we are at a fascinating moment, as we've talked about today, where the worlds of food and health and ag are moving in closer orbit. And so when we look at what's happening in the healthcare space with business models evolving from volume to value, from treatment to preventative, and this growing recognition that what we eat has really significant outcomes on, or impacts on health outcomes and also cost. And then meanwhile, we have innovation happening on both sides of the chain. So if you look at in the food space, what's happened with GLP-1s and the adoption of GLP-1s and how that has changed human diet. Also, the increasing science on ultra-processed foods tied to health outcomes in the food space. And then in agriculture, we have emerging and new technology that's really shows a lot of promise and potential in how crops, the kind of nutrient density of crops, more study on the soil microbiome and what that means for the human microbiome. So really fascinating time to be having this conversation, and thrilled to be joined by the panelists that we have today. So I'd like to introduce Heather Eicher-Miller. She is Associate Professor of the Department of Nutrition Science at Purdue University. We also have Ignacio Bartolome, CEO of GDM. And we have Brad Fruth, Director of Innovation at Bex Hybrids. So welcome to the three of you. I'd also like to mention that our colleague Pat, we met at PepsiCo, had a personal matter that came up that prevented her from attending today, but she shared some reflections in advance, and so I'll be weaving her comments into our dialogue today. Okay? Okay, good. Well, let's get started then. And Heather, it would be great if you would kick us off and talk a little bit about the state of research right now in this area of human nutrition, innovation that's happening, and kind of just lay the groundwork for us about, at a consumer standpoint, kind of where are we and where are things?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so I love to talk about this. And, you know, Christy, you mentioned so many great innovations that we have going on right now in this space. But I think one of the things that's kind of underappreciated is where we are as a population with our diets. So right now, if we think about the kind of standards we have set, like our most evidence-based nutritious diet we could think of, that would be the Dietary Guidelines for Americans diet, represented by My Plate. So when we think about that diet, and we would want to know, like, where are we as a population? How do our diets compare to that? And kind of thinking of a grade scale, like 100% is A+. I wonder where everyone would think we are. Any guesses? 60, I hear. Okay, that's really optimistic. Yes. So, I mean, actually, 60 is close. So we're hovering at like an F to an F+. So we all need a lot of work on our diets, despite having all of this great science to show us what they should look like. And it really means, like, when we think about the My Plate, we're not getting enough, you know, of those things we know we need, like vegetables, fruits, whole grains, low-fat proteins, low-fat dairy. All those things have nutrients in them that we need every day to prevent chronic disease. And we're having too much of other things like added sugars, saturated fat, and sodium. And so, you know, along with the dietary components, we also need more, you know, physical activity and more sleep. Everything is hard to do, but all those things together are kind of killing us slowly. You know, we have really high burdens of cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes. Obesity is at like 42% now among all Americans. So, and that's kind of a background condition. So we really need innovations that can help us change our behaviors. But that's where I wanted to kind of answer your question. I think some of the biggest innovations could really be in, working on changing behaviors, recognizing that it's not just an individual's problem, but it's like where we are and where, thinking about the environments we're in and the food that we have. We've mentioned food security a lot, like accessing food, and it's not just, an issue for people with low incomes, but actually for all of us, like all the places we go every day and we get food there. And so is that food really, helping us? Is it healthy for us? So I think we need to tackle the problem in a really kind of complex way of thinking about more than just changing our own behaviors, but changing these environments around us.
Super. Really interesting. Not great to hear that we're at an F plus. So we've got one direction to go from here up. So it's interesting. You mentioned a lot of the dynamics and a lot of the things that we do kind of at a basic function level as people. Some of the outcomes of that are not realized until later in life when you have kind of these chronic diseases appear and so forth. So want to talk a little bit about Pat's perspective and the conversation that we had in our prep and also the information that she sent to me. We talked a little bit about how does PepsiCo monitor the consumer and how do they decide when to invest in R&D and kind of what they put forward in terms of their goals from a nutrition standpoint, from a sustainability standpoint. And Pat said they have, as you would imagine, a very robust consumer research department that looks at 5 to 10-year trends. She also talked about the role of TikTok and social media in, especially in younger generations, and how food is becoming more of a lifestyle and more of an experience in that generation than it has been in previous generations. And we talked a little bit about the viral trend. Sometimes you need to eat an entire cucumber, I think it was called, which ended up resulting in increased consumption of cucumber. She talked about the difference between a trend and an embedded behavior and how PepsiCo works to spot that. The other thing that she mentioned was the rise of GLP-1s. And she talked about that as a trend that she thinks no one could have accurately predicted in terms of its impact on the food system. And she said really it has reshaped how people view nutrition, especially the component of the population that is on a GLP-1. So they are looking at different portion sizes. They're looking at also how to deliver macronutrients and also micronutrients in the foods that they innovate. And also, she said fiber is the new protein. So they're really innovating toward that. So hopefully addressing some of the dynamics that you talked about, Heather, but we'll see. So interesting. So Nacho, let's go to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. So GDM has made some strategic investments recently, both in acquisition, but also in R&D. You have really emerged, your company has emerged as a top-tier player in corn and soybean genetics, globally an important supplier. So thank you for your leadership, and we're also thrilled that you're here, and especially with your recent acquisition of AgriLiant, looking forward to your North America presence growing. So could you talk with us a little bit about plant genetics and the role that plant genetics and innovation plays in a safe, affordable, nutritious food supply from your perspective?
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. So very honored to be here. It's my first panel in Indiana, so I hope my English is okay and you can understand it.
Very good.
Yes. So no, I think this summit and this idea of One Health really in our industry, and because of the new technologies that are being used in genetics is very, very timely, because we have now a very core technology. It's called gene editing that probably already heard about, and it's being used in plants. And what it allows you is to speed up the process of discovery of genes and also of editing the plants to actually do whatever we want them to do in order to deliver a specific characteristic. That used to take between 5, 7, 12 years, depending on the crop. now it can take 6 months. And if the regulation goes along, which it has gone along in the Americas, let's say Brazil, Argentina, the US, and most of the countries except Europe, it can also reduce the cost of developing this product. So we could have a massive amount of new products, more customized product coming to the market. And actually, to start understanding what you need to customize for, you need to start talking with the industry because, for example, you were talking, I'm celiac, so I cannot eat gluten. I'm allergic to gluten. So it's always a problem for me, because I like gluten, I like bread, but typically it's very bad, the bread for celiacs. So now we're working with a company in Spain that we are actually taking out the allergen for celiacs from wheat, but it still keeps the gluten. So the gluten is not bad because of the gluten. It's bad because of there is an allergen that generates some illness in people that are intolerant like me. That can be done today, and it can be done in 6 months. And if the regulation allows it, it opens up, a new opportunity for this type of discovery. So for us, for a genetic company, now it's not only looking at how do we supply what the farmer wants, that typically has been yield because the industry pays them for producing more bushels per acre, but also now talking to the industry, say, what would you be interested in doing so that we can do it in the genetics and you don't have to put additives to food in order to develop it, but we can actually develop that healthy food from the very beginning, not only for humans, but also for animals. Another example is we developed a soybean with a low raffinose stachys that increases digestibility for my monogastrics. So what that does is not only the animals need less food in order to grow the same amount of kilos, but also the development period shortens, so there's less exposure towards diseases. And this is real, it's happening, and it's only a matter of time until we see it very widespread, which will also help bring more companies into the space and more innovation. But at the end, to develop better products, we need to know what the demand is, and we need to start working together, not only to breed and develop genetics for yield, but also now for other type of characteristics.
Super interesting. And if you can solve the gluten-free bread, that would be a service to the world. Yeah, no, thank you. That's really fascinating, and I think the promise of gene editing is really, to address sensory issues, to address nutrition, it just holds so much potential to help advance nutrition and food security in the world. So Brad, welcome.
Thank you.
Brad, you are one of the leading voices in this food is health space from an ag perspective. A person I seek out to pressure test ideas. I always love having a conversation with Brad, and I always know that Brad is going to push me to back up my thinking, which is always very good. So Brad, talk to us a little bit about the farmer perspective. Bex has great relationships with farmers, your farmer dealers. You're very close to the farm. Your role in really testing innovation and understanding innovation that will have value at the farm gate. Can you share with us, from your perspective, what does this food as health space mean at the farm gate? And what would need to happen to enable scale, to enable economic opportunity, agronomic opportunity? Give us your thoughts on that.
Sure. No, so thank you for the opportunity. I think what's interesting, I like how Pat's comments, where she brought up, is this a fad? I think there's some fatigue at the farm gate right now. Their incentive right now at the farmer is bushels, right? And Ignacio talked about it. They are paid to grow more bushels. Nobody really cares about the quality of it. If we look back in the last 4 to 5 years, there's also a trend around this environmental carbon thing that it really flaked out. There was a lot of hype. It actually doesn't affect the farm gate whatsoever. So there's a little bit of callousness, if I could be so bold, at the farm gate level. So what has to change is, I think that, if you look at the supply chains in agriculture, they're pretty complex, no matter if you're in grains or animals. And honestly, it's those vertically integrated supply chains that are going to force this to be something different. Here in Indiana, we have our friends at Ingredion. Cargill has a non-GMO program. And so there's this disconnect when they hear One Health and food is health. One of the things that I say is like, my name's Brad, I'm from Bex, I'm here to help, and I have no idea how to help, right? But we keep showing up and we keep saying, what are the markets going to be and how can I form relationships with people like Pat? I just met Pat a couple months ago and I was like, Pat, we got to become best friends. Like, how can Beck's Hybrids and our customers help Pat achieve her goals at PepsiCo? And how can we sort out what are these fads and what is going to drive value? So farmers will do whatever you incentivize them to do. Be very careful what that incentive is and make sure that the driver is actually affecting the income. And so I think that there's a lot of excitement here. And so working with some of the partners in more of these vertically integrated supply chains to start with, to maybe influence, wheat, bread, maybe it's chicken, maybe it's our friends in pork. The cattle guys are making so much money right now, they're just out counting their money. They don't really care. But for those of us in row crop where times are tough, we're all looking, how can I decommoditize this product? And we even see that in my family farm in north central Indiana. I mean, we're 10 miles from an ethanol plant. So you talk about food as health, I'm like, all my stuff goes into ethanol. Like, that's what's driving. So we do have these hyper-local markets. And so what I think is going to be key is how do we build relationships with folks to impact these vertically integrated supply chains. And farmers will give them whatever they want, but they're going to have to pay them. Secondarily, when you're looking at value, you have to understand what the commodity market is. I tell people I lost 6 months of my life to a hemp project where they told me that farmers were going to do more work and get paid less in the commodity market. And I'm like, you guys are nuts, right? So you have to know what the current market is, the value that you're creating, and then how you're going to influence change. You put all those parts and pieces together, and farmers will gladly be an excited partner in that.
Interesting, very good. Yeah, and I think, Nacho, going back to one of the things that you mentioned, it's interesting when you think about the potential of gene editing and precision breeding to develop an ingredient that when it arrives to the food company is closer to what they need than it is today. You made the point about not having to potentially add additional preservatives or emulsifiers or things like that. The potential there is really significant, and then it affects the cost of the overall cost also of the product as well.
Yes, 100%, but I agree 100% that at the end, all of us, in our professional careers, we work for getting paid. Nobody wants to work for free. And the farmers are working to produce their grain, and they are getting paid for bushels. So until there's not somebody that actually pays them a premium that really incentivizes them to do this, it's not going to happen. And the challenge is that we live in a commodity world, and commodity is volume. You cannot segregate things because the margins are so thin that as you start, changing the supply chain, is going to be very impactful, and nobody's going to do it. ADM, Bunge, Cargill, Dreyfus, they're not going to do it. And probably there's going to be smaller companies or these companies if somebody's paying it at the end. So the technology is there. I think the capacity is there, even at the global scale. There are things that American farmers can do better. There are things that Brazilian farmers can do better. There are things that Argentinian farmers can do better. And if we could kind of balance all of that out towards the most efficient way of producing food, it can be done. It's very difficult because it's very long supply chains. There are global supply chains, and they are built for commodities. And this kind of idea of how we use these tools to develop different type of products for the farmers needs to come from the demand side. It's going to be a pull. It's not going to be a push. Our side of the industry is not going to do it because we sell to farmers seed and genetics for bushels. And until somebody sends a different signal from the other side, it's not going to change. And we are going to have to do it together, because it has to start small. One quick example in Argentina, it's not for food, but it's for biofuels. There's this crop called camelina that is a new crop that is being talked about, and it fits a space in the farming calendar year that it can produce a value. And there's a kind of an industry push between Dreyfus, Bunge, us, and some distributors to push the crop. Now, today, Bunge and Dreyfus are paying more than they should probably for the crop to push farmers to do it, so they have the experience, so we can invest more in genetics, so they can get a better yield, and the volume starts going up. And in 3 years, we went from 3,000 hectares, so 7,000 acres, to almost 200,000 acres. So it can be done, but it requires somebody that is determined to do it and is willing to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. Great insight. And so, let's go back to the consumer. You mentioned the market signal, the signal that needs to happen at the other end of the value chain. So Heather, there are a lot of challenges, a lot of obstacles to improving nutrition. What is achievable, and what is the big win from your perspective? Give us a sense from what you think.
Yeah, I really love this panel, kind of like how we're, starting at the beginning of the food supply all the way out to people. But yeah, so I think we have so many opportunities, and we've already demonstrated that we really can change things. So I'll give an example coming from sweetened beverages. Unfortunately, Pat's not here. But when we saw sweetened beverages come onto the market in the 1970s, intake of added sugars from sweetened beverages really increased, and that continued to increase until the 2000s. Since then, we've seen a decrease, and that's been very positive for human health. Some of the factors there have come from consumer education, primary care providers giving nutrition education, federal nutrition education. Also, companies reformulating their products, companies like PepsiCo, creating a lot of alternatives and different options for consumers have also helped. And then we've also seen public policy help with that as well, where we've had, kind of maybe an example would be vending machines are not turned on in schools during school hours. So that also kind of helps us control when children are allowed to have sweetened beverages. So I think that really shows how all across different systems and a lot of the partners we have gathered here today, if we are all working together, we can make changes to behavior that impact our health in the nutrition space. And recently, I was part of the group that was involved in the Dietary Guidelines for Americans Scientific Advisory Committee. And when we were looking at diet in the U.S. and how, modeling that, I think one of the upcoming wins there that we could tackle is sodium. So sodium is so prevalent in our food supply, and almost any way we modeled it, like what if people don't eat, salty snacks? We took that out of diets and we remodeled. What if people stopped eating, like we went down the scale of like more and more things that had sodium in them that we could remove from the diet, and it was still almost impossible to get below the chronic disease reduction risk level for sodium. So I think that's one that we could tackle in the food supply, because we have been able to do things about added sugars. And so I think that's one of the kind of areas of nutrition we could get to next.
Great. That's how we're going to get higher than an F+ next time. So we also chatted with Pat a little bit about this topic. And one of the things that she discussed is that, especially when it comes to One Health, that there is an opportunity to learn across sectors. So she said studying nutrition in a real-world setting is incredibly complex, but she also talked about the fact that there are things that we can learn in the food space from the animal space. So she talked in particular about understanding how ingredients affect the gut microbiome. And she said, what can we be learning from Elanco that we're not? We're not talking today. And those are the sorts of partnerships and collaborations that can help advance us more quickly to better affect human nutrition as well. So in about 10 minutes, we're going to open for questions for this panel. So just be thinking about what you may want to ask. Nacho, let's go back to you. And innovation timelines are a challenge. And oftentimes they're mismatched with the food space, which moves quickly, and the ag space, which has a longer term timeline just because of the nature of regulatory system, et cetera. Talk to us about what GDM is doing to kind of bridge that gap. How are you thinking about partnerships and collaborations and so forth?
Perfect. No, I think also one thing to understand from the ag industry and farming is that we get one time a year to try things. We cannot plant corn, every day or sell something every day. You have one time a year. So I'm 38, so I always say have 30, 35 seasons to do whatever I want to do because it's only 30, 35. I'm not going to get more. So the kind of our globalization also was thinking on having more of those because when here's winter, South America is summer, so then you get 2. And then Brazil is kind of in between, so then you get 3. So that is one way that we are using, and it has been used in the industry. It's nothing new, but it has been accelerated, that you can use both hemispheres to speed up the breeding cycles. In the past, if it was 12 years for breeding cycles because you had 12 seasons to develop a product, with a winter season that is called in the industry, you can do it in half time. So it's 6 years instead of 12. And now, using places like the north part of Brazil or Arizona here in the US or Hawaii, you can even do 6 cycles of soybeans in a year or 4 cycles of corn in a year. So now you're reducing time again by half. So that is a way of developing product in a traditional way that has sped up the delivery of innovation, and at the end, is increasing the genetic gain, which is what we always look for, and the denominator of the genetic gain formula is time. Now with gene editing, and also I would say 3 things. Gene editing is the tool that you use to actually edit the DNA of a plant or animal or a person and deliver some characteristic. But then what you need to know is what gene you need to touch in order to deliver certain characteristic. So what happened in the past is that the cost of molecular analysis has gone down 100 times in the past 10 years. So it's very cheap to have the full DNA of a particular variety, and computing power also has increased and reduced the cost. And then you have phenotyping tools to actually see in the field what's going on with the plants, with drones, with more cameras and different things that we're using. So now if you can look for correlations between what the plant is doing in the field, what the sequence of DNA is representing on the molecular level, and then find the correlations of what genes are giving which characteristics, then you can go back and edit them and do it in 6 months. So this process has accelerated a lot because of those factors, and I think we are just at the beginning of this kind of activity, and hopefully, in the next years, it's going to accelerate even more. So those type of things are happening, are real. Today, Jeff was mentioning, the RTP. We have a lab in the RTP for gene editing, and in 2.5 years, we were able to already have in the field 6 different types of soybean and corn hybrids with specific characteristics that we edit for. That 5 years ago, we would have thought that it would have taken us 8 to 10 years to do that. So it's all the time speeding up.
Interesting. It's always fascinating to talk to a leader like Nacho and also a global company. You realize how big and how small the world is at the same time, and how important it is to be so connected. And if you run into Nacho, I would suggest asking him, which is the country that is the NBA for soybeans right now? I had an interesting conversation with him last night, and you might be surprised at the answer. So Brad, let's talk again about agronomy and also how agronomy kind of intersects with nutrition. So as we move from yield to resilience to nutrition, what changes do you see happening, and what role does soil health, does regenerative ag play?
Yeah, you're setting me up on a soapbox. Thank you, Christy. No, so I think that science, honestly, is a question mark for us. So what we hear from some folks in the health side right now is that everybody needs to go to regenerative, that we have to boost soil health, and that's going to affect the nutritional outcome of the products that we sell. And so that science, honestly, we think is still questionable. And so some of the work that we've been doing within our practical farm research is, can we draw a line, and is that true or not? And so we've actually been doing some work with a startup company on the East Coast where we're taking hybrids that are grown in different areas and then using different tillage methods to see, does it affect the nutritional outcome of these products? But keep in mind, we sell corn, soybeans, and wheat. Nobody eats these products directly. And so that is where there's a disconnect in that market. So we're trying to figure that out, I think, along with the rest of the market. For farmers from an agronomy standpoint, let's just pick on no-till. I mean, we have a 35-year no-till plot at Beck's. No-till is not a new technology. Cover crops, my grandfather did cover crops, back at the turn of the century. So these are not new methods. And so what we're learning is that some farmers get a little annoyed when people show up and go, hey, you got to go to no-till. No-till is a great practice to conserve topsoil in certain parts of the United States. It does not work well in the north, does not work well in the south, and farmers where that shows an advantage are already utilizing these technologies. So there is some disconnect with some of our health friends that show up and go, you have to do no-till, and I'm going to pay you $2 or $9 an acre to do this. And I'm like, I sell corn to an ethanol market, like, this is not adding up here. So some of the value incentives are not aligned. Secondly, I would add to that, in trying to understand that, we are leaning on some of our friends in animal agriculture. A lot of genetics companies are building these computational breeding models right now, where traditionally all we looked at was yield, moisture, and test weight. Now we're starting to look at things like protein content, amino acids. There's a great product in Iowa Lake soybeans that was in the fry industry. Now we're finding out dairies can increase milk fat. So your eating slow churn ice cream should taste better, and farmers are making more money off of that. So those are great examples of where now we're screening more products for more things and trying and being able to have a data set that when an ingredient company or a food company says, I want a product that does X, Y, Z, that we actually have the data to be able to say, here's the breeding, here's the markers. Then we go to a company like GDM and say, okay, let's edit this soybean to do X, Y, Z. But the disconnect right now, and I think there was a lady that brought it up in the last panel, there is a disconnect between agronomy and outcomes right now. And so as we're dealing with an annual cycle, we're trying to speed up those learnings as fast as we can, mainly through screening panels.
Christy, sorry, now, if I may add, and this type of collaborations, like a company like ours with Beck, I mean, this is a lot of new information that needs to be delivered to the farmer. So it's not easy because it takes a lot of time. Farmers are used to do things for a long time. It's hard for them to change. They have, again, if they miss it, it was one time that they missed for the next 30, 40 that they have. So the risk is high in order to do very disruptive things. So the more that we can work together, have the correct incentives, and then deliver the information correctly to the farmers, knowing what they are, what they want to the risk for, is the way to do it, but it's hard. It's not an easy, we can talk a lot about it, but it's hard then to execute it.
And then we need Pat to buy all this stuff at the end of the day, right? She's got to buy
more,
she has to,
sure.
she's going to pay more, okay?
Yeah,
she doesn't know it yet, but she is, right? So then we have to have somebody that buys this pile of a product that actually pulls that through the market.
Yeah, interesting. It's the two people at the end of this panel are dreamers and pragmatists at the same time. So, and that is why they're very interesting to talk to, because at the end of the day, we can want this and we can innovate toward it, but we also have to be practical about.
Yeah. So I think I've sat at my whiteboard in my office with a lot of trait startup companies trying to figure out how anybody's going to pay them $1. So it doesn't mean that we aren't thinkers and dreamers, and at the end of the day, we sit down and look at the economics and go, they'll say, well, this makes the soybean plant greener. Awesome. I can't pay you $1 for this, right? And so a lot of this is how do we get to the point where we can figure out how does everybody make money? Is it in the current supply chain? Do we collapse it? And then farmers will definitely grow those products.
Yeah, and here we have an interesting opportunity to be a test bed, honestly, because of what we have in terms of production ag, what we have in terms of value-added nutrition and food segments here in manufacturing. So we have an interesting we can be a living lab here for this kind of thing. And also, I do think that there is an opportunity for our specialty crop segments as well. I mean, they have a significant role to play in this food as health space. So now is an opportunity for you all to ask our panel any questions you may have. got a question, you can hold your hand up for the microphone. Right here in the front.
Hi, my name's Ryan. I'm from the other part of the health side, but that's why this conference is so great to get to hear ideas from other industries. And just where you left off there about PepsiCo and buyers, I was just wondering how you think of alternatives, other people who might come in to buy. In the health world, we think maybe employers, maybe consumers, and try to experiment that way. But in your world, what's that like?
Yeah, so anybody that wants to buy a product, come on up, see me after. I'd love to sell you whatever I can, right? This jacket's for sale if you want to buy it, right? We're all capitalists. That's where I think there's a unique opportunity in the supply chain. So, for example, I mentioned the high oleic soybeans. Like, we're seeing a big uptake where dairies right now are buying their own roasting machines. They're growing the high oleic soybean, they're roasting it themselves, and they're getting the value by increasing milk fat in dairy cows. I did not mention any of the what we call ABCDs. There's no grain buyer in there. There's no pocket you have to grease, right? And so that's where we see some of that market happening right now, where we can create these closed loop systems where the value is going to the person that's paying for the product, and then we're seeing a huge uptake in that market. But yeah, it doesn't have to be with what we'd call a grain originator. It could be directly on farm with people that are getting all the value.
No, 100% agree. If somebody wants a jacket, can take two for a lower price.
There you go. There you go. We got a deal. We got a BOGO here, guys. Come on.
No, I agree 100%. And then, again, an example in Argentina, you know that maybe given that it's a small, all the agriculture is in a smaller place, it has been easier to find some of the ABCDs that are willing to do this closed loop. But at the end, for example, the business model that we are trying is we are developing soybeans with higher oil content. So they're willing to pay it because then they have the oil share is better for them when they sell the byproducts of soybeans. Now, we tell them, we don't see that value. You know, that value, you're going to capture that value when you crush the soybeans and then you sell the oil and the protein separately. So what we are trying to do is partnering with them instead of us trying to charge them more, because if we do it at the get-go, maybe the whole business doesn't flow. We are trying to say, okay, let's do it, and then we share whatever profit we can make after you crush the products. We'll share some of that, whether it's higher or lower. We share a percentage of that, and that incentivizes us to deliver those products to the farmer without trying to collect that value that you still don't know how much it's going to be up front, because if you do it, then the business never starts rolling.
One of the interesting things I think also in that regard is what's happening with functional medicine and the rise of functional medicine and the role of food in functional medicine, even to the point where, there are practices here in Indiana that have classes, like I'm celiac, now what? How do I cook for that? So interesting kind of blend or merge of these adjacent industries in that way. Other question?
Hi, my name is Trisha. I come from a family of hog farmers up in northern Indiana and South Whitley. I'm just curious, my grandfather, he lived to be 104 and he had the farm for all those years. And my cousin has taken it over, but it's a fraction of the operation of what it used to be. What are your companies doing or other companies in your spaces doing to inspire younger generations to keep farming?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for still being in the hog business. My family is also in the hog business. I have a small show pig operation because I'm a gambler and I like to lose money. So thank you for what you guys do every single day. I think what we're seeing, at least what we see at Beck's Hybrids, is that we are going to have less farms, right? We are going to get more efficient. There are going to be less number of farms doing more things. what I think has been really interesting is that we have a phenomenal team at Beck's Hybrids. People like myself, right, that did not have the opportunity to go back to the family farm because the economics don't work out well, but I still get an awesome career in agriculture. And we have people that work in accounting, marketing, sales, across the business that still get that pull into agriculture. Our average customer at Beck's is still what you would call relatively small. And so I think we are seeing a little bit of a diversification of some smaller farmers and larger farmers out there. But there is going to be, we've seen it in hogs and chickens, happen at a fairly fast clip. So we're starting to see it a little bit in row crop agriculture, but the field of agriculture still needs entrepreneurial, phenomenal, smart people to come back and push the envelope. So I'm excited about the future. I see amazing talent. It's going to look different, right? I mean, my grandpa raised sows in the woods with huts. We just don't do those production styles anymore. However, the legacy of those family farms, I think, are still going to be in the field of agriculture in multiple different ways.
Maybe what I can share, 100% agree again. I think, the landscape is changing, and maybe we don't need to get attached to what it was and not fight the forces of change, and it's what it is, and how do we adapt to it. But I'll tell you, in Argentina and Brazil, small farmers are very few, and the trend of consolidation in the farming industry is being very rapid, and you have companies that farm 1 million acres. So it's not anymore a farmer sitting on a tractor and a combine. It's a business person with an accounting department and a strategy department and technicians to run a business. And I think that I think it is happening in the U.S. as well, maybe at a slower pace. But I think that's kind of the trend, especially in a commodity markets, and because it's very hard in the U.S. to keep people in the interior and the rural areas and continue to do those developments. So I think they need to turn less farmers are more business people that farm, and I think that's probably the trend in the medium long term.
Okay. We're down to our 3-minute mark, so let's do a lightning round. What is a key takeaway you would leave with this audience, each of you, on what they can do to advance this One Health movement from their corner of the system? You want to start, Heather?
I can go, yeah. So I think one of the biggest things here is and especially for this audience who are all kind of power players in your area, thinking about how we can make the healthy choice the easier choice, because we're fighting things like taste, which is actually the biggest motivator for what food choice is. It's it has to taste good. No matter what innovations you put into it, it still has to taste good, so people will choose it. But we want the most healthy option to be the best tasting. So I think, we have certain control in different places we go, maybe more control in our homes than in, schools in our community. So we're going to have to use different tactics for that. Some things might require more kind of grassroots efforts, where some things could be more, policies. But yeah, that's what I would say. I think that's what we should work on.
Well, maybe what has worked for us, definitely to push this, we're going to have to collaborate and truly collaborate. Many times that happens, with new companies, new technology, etc. Everybody tries to build a business before they actually develop the technology or the product. We say always test and talk. Let's sit down, let's not talk about the business, let's talk about developing the actual product, service, and how we're going to add value. And then if this works, we'll probably both parties are going to want to find a way of sharing the value, because we're going to want to deliver it to the market. So I think true collaboration is, instead of first thinking how you're going to make money, is first think how you really are going to, develop the technology, and how is it actually going to end up adding value to somebody, and don't stop the collaboration or the testing of the technologies because of the business. Do it the opposite. And for us, it has worked, and I don't know. I think it's a good way of doing it.
I think the one takeaway is this is a phenomenal room with some really smart people in it. You know, place does have a part in this conversation. And, you know, both AgriNovus and BioCrossroads have built amazing ecosystems. You know, so I concentrate on relationships. So that's why, as I said earlier, I show up to these things like, I'm not sure how I can help. I show up and I meet Pete like Pat from PepsiCo, right? So the more relationships that we can build within the ecosystem here in Indiana, I think is extremely valuable, because then once we know what's on everybody's mind, how can we help solve problems for one another, that to me is when great products and great things come out of it. So, you know, I'll admit it. Look, I get into downtown and I get out as fast as I can, you know? The IU School of Medicine, I don't have a lot of great contacts. So you gave me the stage and the microphone, Christy. So, you know, if there's anybody here that wants to collaborate, wants to do research and testing, I work in the innovation space so I can fail and not get fired. Like, I would love to talk to you. And if there's anything that we can do to be helpful, I think there's place to do it. There's a ton of smart people. If you answer that, capital will follow on the backside of it. But I'm encouraged by the folks in this room. What a phenomenal ecosystem to help solve these, to solve these problems.
Excellent. Well, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you to our panelists. That was a really thought-provoking dialogue, and I think a great charge to all of us.